Yeah, and she was coming in.
Yeah, she went down where that.
I'd like to call the Lordstown Village Caucus to order.
But it was not the end.
First piece of legislation is from the Utility Committee for emergency passage, an ordinance approving change order number 3 in the amount of $274,362.60 for SET Inc. in connections with the water line, sanitary sewer, and pump station improvements for the Clean Energy Future Lordstown project and declaring an emergency. Comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is also reimbursable to the village, and we'd like to see that passed tonight.
Any other comments? The next one's from Utility Committee for emergency passage, an ordinance approving change order number 5 in connection with the Village of Lordstown's amended master agreement for funding of the legal, engineering, and construction costs for the Clean Energy Future Lordstown project and declaring an emergency. Comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this one's for $45,000, and again, it is reimbursable. We'd like to see it passed tonight.
Okay, any other comments? The next one's from Council as a whole for emergency passage, an ordinance accepting the bid of Western Reserve Coach Sales, Inc. for the purchase of one used 2016 Ford Eldorado bus and declaring an emergency. Comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we'd like to see this pass emergency tonight to get passed so we could get the legislation in place so Western Reserve can take possession of the bus.
Okay, any other comments? The next one's for Finance Committee for emergency passage, an ordinance authorizing the clerk to transfer the sum of $312 from the general fund into the unclaimed money fund pursuant to ordinance 3999 and declaring an emergency. Comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Also, we'd like to see this passed tonight. It's just an unclaimed check that was never taken to the bank, so we need to clean it up.
Any other comments? The next one's from the Negotiating Committee for emergency passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 118, 2016, establishing the authorized strength of salary and other terms of remuneration for the part-time chief of the fire department and part-time assistant chief of the Village of Lordstown, effective January 1st, 2018, and declaring an emergency. Comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we'd like to see these all 4 of these next ones passed this evening. Last year, the ambulance and the firefighters only got a 1-year contract, so we're trying to get everything in order so that everybody's wages and stuff have to be negotiated on the same in the same year.
Are there any other comments? I guess my comment is if this doesn't take effect till January 1st, 2018, and I can remember several times we tried to at least go a reading or 2 when we were talking about wages. What's the emergency?
Well, it doesn't have to go tonight, that's for sure.
Any other comments? Next, from the Negotiating Committee for emergency passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 15, 2017, establishing the authorized strength, setting the hourly compensation, and other terms of remuneration and conditions of service for members of the Lordstown Village Fire Department, effective January 1st, 2018, and declaring an emergency. Comments?
Again, if council's pleasure is to pass this evening, we'd like to see that done. If not, it can go first reading.
Any other comments? Next one's from the Negotiating Committee for emergency passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 13, 2017, establishing a full-time ambulance service for the Village of Lordstown, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Comments?
Again, this is establishing wages for the next 2 years, and if it's council's pleasure to pass it tonight, they could, or we could do a first reading.
Any other comments? Next one's from the Negotiating Committee for emergency passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 25, 2017, establishing the authorized strength, the hourly wages, and other terms of remuneration, and revising the position description for the Assistant Planning and Zoning Administrator and the Planning and Zoning and Economic Development Departments of the Village of Lordstown, effective upon passage of this ordinance and declaring an emergency. Comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the Negotiating Committee was contacted by the committee that handles that department, and they had unanimously voted to bring this forth again this year. And so when the Negotiating Committee met, we decided to bring it forth to council again. And we would like to see this one passed emergency tonight because of some vacation time and stuff that's scheduled in that department later this year.
Are there any comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to see this go first reading tonight. and I'll be calling for an executive session to discuss this. There's some discrepancies in the job description that we need to hash out with the solicitor and all counsel.
Well, I don't know how we can do this in an executive session since this has already been discussed in an open meeting. It's been discussed in the meeting of the Transportation Senior Services. It was an open meeting there, and it was discussed over there.
I believe that would have been your choice, Karen. Are there any other comments?
What do you mean, my choice?
Well, if you discussed in the open meeting, it didn't go to the executive session, and you've been chairing these meetings.
No, that was not my meeting. I don't even serve on that committee.
Well, you know, for employee compensations and things like that, if you would like to go in executive session, you do have the right to do that. And if the committee didn't go, that was their right. Any other discussion on that? Hearing none, are there any questions on the disposal of the minutes of the regular meeting held October 16th, 2017? Hearing none, are there any questions on the bills in front of you to pass this evening? Hearing none, is there anything council would like to discuss while we're still in caucus before we adjourn and go to the regular meeting?
Yes, I'll be making a motion under new business for refreshments for the lighting ceremony, which will be held on the 17th at 6 o'clock.
Okay. I thought that was going to be the day after Thanksgiving.
No, I talked to you last at the special meeting, and we
Okay.
decided we'd do it.
Okay.
Last year, we did it a week early because a lot of the guys in that department want to take the long weekend to go hunting and so forth.
Not
And
only that, it's a paid holiday for the guys, so they're off already
yeah,
that weekend. So.
Okay, no problem. Okay, anything else council would like to discuss before we adjourn the caucus and go to the regular meeting? Okay, caucus is adjourned. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Lordstown Village Council meeting. If you please stand and join me for the Lord's Prayer and pledge allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory forever. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Bill, if we get a roll call, please.
Mayor Hill.
Present.
Mr. Bond. Here. Mr. Liming. Present. Mr. Radka.
Present.
Mrs. Jones.
present.
Mr. Shealy.
Here.
Mr. Rader.
Present.
Clerk Blank present. Treasurer George Epling.
Here.
Solicitor Paul Dutton.
Present.
Police Chief Brett Milhone.
Present.
Fire Chief Travis Deescan.
Present.
Planning and Zoning Economic Development Kelly Bordner.
Present.
Parks Building and Grounds Street Commissioner Dale Grimm.
Present.
Recreation Marty Gibson. Board of Public Affairs.
Present.
Jess Smith filling in for Chris McGowan.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to excuse Marty Gibson. She was up at the high school working with a new yoga instructor to show them what's going on and asked to be excused.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Reader, second by Mr. Radka. Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Entertain a motion for adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Jones, second.
Second.
Second by Liming. Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Entertain a motion for disposal of the minutes of the regular meeting held October 16th, 2017.
So moved.
Moved by Shealy, second.
Second.
Second by Lyman. Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Entertain a motion for payment of the bills.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Reader, second by Bond. Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Mayor's report. I know I brought up a couple meetings ago about our Lordstown CIC, Community Improvement Corporation, and asked if there was any interest. I have talked to the solicitor, and he told me the proper procedure to disband that would be to call a meeting of the 5 who are on it, which would be myself, the finance chair, the council president, the president of the board of school board, and also a representative from Huntington Bank. And we can sit and discuss it, and if we make a motion to disband that, then we take official action and get a hold of the solicitor, but I intend to do that here in the next couple of weeks so we can get that wrapped up hopefully by the end of the year, because we haven't used it for quite a while. So,
Is there any money left?
yeah, there's about $1,200-1,300, that's it. So, and also, everybody should have had in their box to accept a resignation for an auxiliary we had who got a full-time position in Niles. So I'll be asking for council to accept the resignation. That's it for the mayor's report. Is there a clerk's report this evening?
No report, Mayor.
Okay, is there a solicitor's report?
No report.
Is there a treasurer's report?
No report.
Is there a board of trustees of public affairs report?
No report, but we have our meeting on the 21st at, I'll say 4 o'clock instead of 1600, so you guys don't get confused.
Okay, thank you. Village engineers report.
No report.
Okay, special reports. Police Chief Milhone.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've submitted my monthly report for October. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. The only other thing I have, as you mentioned earlier, Mayor, Officer Taylor Romaine accepted a full-time position at the Niles Police Department, so she'll be leaving us. I received a phone call today from Jason Holland, who's the police chief at Niles. His desire is to purchase Taylor's vest for her, which they've done in the past with other communities. As you know, we in the past have sold vests to officers at a prorated cost. This is the first time I've been approached by another municipality, but the way I see it, it's a win for everybody. Taylor gets to keep her vest, which is custom fit for her. It really does no use to us unless we happen to hire somebody who's her exact size, which is unlikely. The village gets a good portion of their money back that they purchased the vest for, and Niles gets to purchase a vest at a reduced price. So without any opposition, I will send the information to Mr. Dutton tomorrow and ask him to prepare legislation for the next council meeting if there is no objection to that.
Any questions for Brent? Okay, Fire Chief Eastham.
No report.
Okay, any questions for Travis? Planning and Zoning Administrator and Director of Economic Development, Kelly.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Dollar General replaced the dead and dying trees on the earthen barrier. They look very nice, much better. Hopefully, they are hoping that they got them in time so that they can take root before the really bad weather. But if there's a problem come spring, we have a contact for them. We're to get in touch with them and they will replace again. Hopefully that won't be necessary because they had to expend some extra money to do that, but they did do it. It looks very nice.
Okay, any questions for Kelly? Parks, Grounds, Building, Street Superintendent, Mr. Grimm.
No report this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Questions for Dale? Okay, Marty's not here. Bill, do we have any correspondence this evening?
No correspondence, Mayor.
Okay, public remarks. If you'd like to make a public remark after I acknowledge you, please come to the microphone and give your name and address so we can get it recorded in the minutes correctly. Okay, Donna.
Donna Schrader, Lordstown, Ohio. I wanted to talk about the trains from last week. I know I contacted the police department and different things. There was 4 times last week that the trains had Highland Avenue completely blocked. The first 2 times I have no information about. The one last Thursday, it was blocked for an hour and 25 minutes. It would move a little bit and then back up. Then it didn't move for a long time. It was 155 cars on that train. The engine that was pulling it wasn't a good one, it wasn't a new one. And guys from the railroad came up the road and talked to me and said that there was something wrong with the first engine. They were taking some kind of a piece up there, and then after that they would get the train going. Well, the train took over almost 25 minutes to clear the tracks after it got going. Friday's train was down 2 hours and 15 minutes. So that makes a total of 3 hours and 40 minutes that train had Highland Avenue blocked on those 2 days. And I don't know what they had it blocked on the other 2. Usually nobody knows if that's even happening. If you have an ambulance, if you have a fire truck, they're not going to get through. They come up there and the people are mad and they turn around in my yard and I don't appreciate it, and that's why I am up here. Is there anybody I can contact as a homeowner to do anything about this situation? Because the second train on Friday was the same type of train that had the same 2 engines on it. So whatever they're doing, they told me Friday's train had brake problems. They couldn't build up to get the brakes going. Is there anybody I can contact? Because I will pursue this.
Don, I will tell you, we as a village, we've had Mr. Dutton involved with it. I'll turn it over to Brent or Paul here in a couple minutes. This is under federal guidelines. I remember years ago, the former first police chief, Malcolm, used to cite them. And they'd go to court all the time when they were blocking the tracks, especially here on 45 before they got the bridge. We've had Capri Cafaro involved. We've had Tim Ryan's office involved. We've had, and we've all been trying to work. I think everybody up here is aware. We have a bigger problem down there by Smooth Road. And
it's like they're moving that problem up a little further and just tying all of Lordstown up now, and that's not right.
The only thing they've told us, and all that, Brent and I had a discussion about that just today. If we had an emergency or something like that, they said they would break the train, split it there so we could get the cars through. Now, and I know that's not what you want to hear, but we've been fighting this for 15, 20 years.
Take too? That person up on the other side or that house on the other side can die or be destroyed. And it's not a good situation for this village.
Well, we agree. Brent, do you have any comments on that?
No, everything Mrs. Schrader said is true. We were given the same information by CSX when we called. The second day they had braking issues. We received a number of calls, a number of complaints. But I will also say what the mayor said is accurate as well. They have informed us that if we have an emergency, and they define an emergency as a police, fire, EMS. They don't define emergency as an inconvenience to our residents. And I don't think it's right either. It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating for our school system. Our buses have been held up. They don't define that as an emergency. They define an emergency as life, and that has to do with police, fire, and EMS. And they've assured us that if we have a true emergency, we have a specific number that we are to call, and they will break the train. To answer your question as far as how long that would take, I can tell you if I was on one side of the train in a police car, I would go around and probably beat the brake. Right. But I can't answer you to how long that will take.
I know. I've talked to you about it before, and this is frustrating, but there's got to be something. I don't know.
Well, we've researched this in the past. This is probably the 10th time someone has spoken up at council, and we've researched it and written opinion letters and then reinforced the opinion letters and so forth. The law provides that railroads are governed by the federal government and the Federal Rail Transport Agency. And because of the Interstate Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution, no political subdivision, county, state, village, municipal corporation such as Lordstown can regulate that. So we can't pass ordinances, we can't cite them. And that's not an answer that should be acceptable, but that is the answer. Now you're saying, what can you do? That train services someone that's not the federal government. I don't know if it's General Motors, I don't know if it's Taylor Steel, I don't know who it is. But I would think that they need to know this. And I think every time there is a blockage, I think as many residents as possible should render a complaint. Now, talking about General Motors in this village, I realize
I don't want to go there.
Yes, I mean, we're talking about killing the goose that lays the golden egg. And but as a practical matter, they need to know every time there's a blockage. I mean, and you can be very diplomatic in the way you you can, I'm assuming you can be, that in registering a complaint, but documenting it. And then the first thing someone's going to say is, well, how often does this happen? And I imagine the chief has records, do you?
I'm sure we could provide those
Right.
if needed.
But that's, as a practical matter, that's all you can do. We've called out news media, we've had press conferences, I mean, we've tried to embarrass, engage in moral suasion, but the guys running those trains, they're paid by the hour, and they're doing their job. And you're not talking to an executive, you're not talking to a lawyer there, you're talking to, and they've been told, ignore, maybe not ignore, but they don't have any jurisdiction over you. And we even issued a citation to Bob Hagan. Remember
We did.
Bob Hagan?
Yes.
Okay, state senator, and he worked on the railroads on the weekends once a month, and we cited him and tried to bring him into Newton Falls Municipal Court, and he just sort of laughed at us. So, but that's the answer, unfortunately.
Is there anything about the length of these trains? Because they have really extended, they used to be 70s, 50s to 80 or something like that, but now these 150 length ones, and I think that's where some of the problem is right now, because they're making them so long.
No question. It's like the triple trailers, and the state of Ohio has finally cracked down on the triple trailers. Maybe another avenue is to encourage some legislation on the federal level that you can't have a train more than so many cars within the same community. I mean, you know, maybe Tim Ryan and the state and the U.S. senators, that might be an approach there. That might get someone's attention, you know.
If you would call Tim Ryan's office, and it's in the book in downtown Warren, his district manager, his name's Rick Leonard. And I've had a lot of dialogue with Rick Leonard on this specific issue. I've also had dialogue over at the General Motors plant with Tom Mock. Everybody's aware of this problem, but we're all stymied, Donna. We'd love to get it corrected. We don't know what to do.
Mayor, if I may, we recently met over at the other crossing that we seem to have more of a problem with at Muthen Springs. And I know the mayor was there, and so was Mr. Reeder and Dale Grimm, and a number of us were there, fire chief, assistant fire chief. And there was representatives from the railroad there, and they shared with us some information that shocked me. They said that they actually have crossings in the state of Ohio that they block for days. Days. So what I took out of that was, if they're not addressing that, do you think they care about us for hours?
His response, whenever he was discussing that, his response was, an hour or 2 hours, you do not have an issue in Lordstown, was their exact response.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, they will come and move, and they will be within 50 foot of the roadway to the end of that train, and they just sit. They disconnected and actually pulled away. That's what they told us. And they said it sat for 3 days. It's one of these little spurs, and it was a country road, and people had to go all the way around. And he said there's nothing you can do about it. And it's not right. We agree with that. But if you want to give Tim Ryan's office a call, ask for Rick Leonard, and explain it to him, and he'll tell you probably the same thing we're telling you here right now.
Oh, I know. It's just
it's a shame.
It's frustrating. Thursdays, the 2 engines, that's all that was over the road.
Oh,
Everything else was back. Just 2 engines. They wouldn't have.
We have the same thing down here. And the thing is, you have school buses would sit there, the kids would come in late.
The school bus was up there for an hour and a half. Community bus was up there for an hour and a half, just sitting there. These kids are on the bus, and their parents probably don't know where they are, and they're sitting up on Island.
Well, we've written tickets over the last many years, and they all got thrown out. Am I correct, Brent?
Well, initially they got fined pretty heavily. But then when they produced that case law that said that we're not permitted to cite anymore, that's when everything went south.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other public remarks? Judy?
Okay, my name is Judy Ginsburg.
I live in Lordstown on Ina Drive, and I'd like to talk about the Ina Drive trials that are going on. Everybody could take one of those, hands it down. How many
Judy, I
options?
will tell you, Judy, this is public remarks. Anybody sitting up here does not have to respond if they don't want to. If they want to, they can, but this is where the public has the right to voice their opinions and everything, but it's not an interrogation. And if council or myself or anybody want to respond, we do
That's
have.
fine. I think you need to hear me out because there's a lot of people that don't understand what's going on, what's happening on Ina Drive. So I'm here to tell you now what's going on, make this public. In a nutshell, my grandparents acquired 100 acres on the Giovanni property. All the plats have been located out throughout. In 1929, they acquired 100 acres. My dad inherited 10 acres of that, somewhere around 1970. 1979, my dad put Ina Drive in at 785 feet. In 1996, he built a turnaround because he was told by the mayor that they would not scrape the roads until he had a turnaround for the vehicles and the buses to turn around. So he did that. Everyone has lived there peacefully for 20 years. The city had permission to use this turnaround for the buses, emergency vehicles. Jeff and Ron, the two owners at the end, have been mowing the grassy strip that's totally at the end. Then came the sewers. And this is when all the problems started. And we have resubmitted back into the courts a lot of documentation that I'm going to show you about now. And looking over the first few maps, on map number 1 is a dedication, shows my dad's interest of what his intentions was of only making the road 785 foot. The second map is Dittmeyer's dedication map. The hash marks at the end there signifies that the turnaround has not been put in there. The road stopped at 785. The third map is just a close-up of the residue area there. So the whole thing in a nutshell is this. When the sewers crossed the property, I called the mayor down for him to, hey, what's going on? You know, they're crossing my property. And he said, well, you're going to have to prove that you own that property. So that's what I've done. And he has spent $20,000 of our tax money fighting this case over that, and I likewise have spent money. But how do you dedicate a part of the road that isn't even there? So the end of Ina Drive wasn't even constructed until 19 years later. So when that map was made in 1979, on map number 2, the dedication of the road was only 785 feet. The 8-foot grassy strip area that's at the end was a buffer for my dad at the turnaround, was a selling point, that the street would not go to the end, and that's what he told the people when he was selling off the lots. And that he was reserving that street would not go in. This is not a case about neighbors not getting along. I don't know those neighbors on the other end, but if you could put yourself in my situation, let's just say sewers are going down your street, and instead of them going up everybody's driveway, they're going to go across your property. And you're going to call the mayor in, and he's going to say, hey, you got to prove that's your property. Now, you have a deed that shows that's your property, but now that the sewers are going across, because they're a little closer to the person, the mayor wants you to spend your money and prove that you own that, although you don't have a deed and everything. So this is the situation, the same situation. If you were in my shoes, you all be fighting for your property, just like I am. I only had a couple encounters with these neighbors. I was ordered off her property when we went down to publicly tell her what was going on, what the petitions were about and everything. Was ordered off her property. The second time, the encounter, the mister took a backhoe and put a whole bunch of debris on our property, called the police in both times, filed reports. But I was told by the police that this was a civil matter and they couldn't do anything about it. Really? You're allowed to go dump stuff on people's property, your neighbors, and there wouldn't be any repercussions? repercussions. That seems hard to believe. The next encounter, and it's an ongoing thing, is they dump their horse manure right along our property edge. So I didn't call the police this time because they weren't going to do anything the first couple times. But I called the Soil Conservation EPA people, got them in, was within 30 feet of the drains. They have 10 days to move their manure piles. Guess where they moved them? They moved them on the property line to the neighbors' backyards by their swimming pools. How childish is that? Crazy, ongoing. So I have pictures and all that if anybody wants to see all that. In the Court of Appeals, the judge asked, somehow the court case got changed from Bart Ginsburg versus the city of Lordstown to Bart Ginsburg versus the Clarks. Got changed. Don't ask me, I don't know. But anyway, the main judge said there, so if this is a case between two neighbors not getting along, what does the city of Lordstown have to do with it? What do they care? And the defense lawyer says, well, their concern was they've maintained it all these years. Really? That's not the truth. It isn't even about the neighbors. It's about the village, or was it Daniels, the neighbors, crossing our property without permission. That's what this whole thing is about. Sewers going in without our permission. If you go to the number 6, Planning and Commission notes of 1994. Now, Mayor said under oath that he was a councilman at that time, and he was actually the mayor, and he had occasional conversations with my dad, when in fact, he was the only one that knew what was going on. If you read this, it's kind of funny because some of the people didn't even know the road existed in 1994. So where was the maintenance? There was no maintenance in 1994. And you can go on down there and just read through those notes because that's what happened there. And you can tell under Mayor Hill there, I kind of highlighted it, that he was the only one that knew what was going on. Most of them didn't even know it was a dedicated road. But Mayor knew what was going on there. And then it was determined that it was a minor subdivision, not a major subdivision. And it was not restricted to any rules whatsoever. So it didn't even have to go to council back then. I think Ms. Jones, you approved it as a minor subdivision back then when he was getting that replot. Mr. Daniels' testimony on number 7, you will see Daniels' map there. Can you see where I highlighted a little circle there and you could see some dots? That end of the line was removed. And when I went up there asking for maps at the tax map people, I noticed those little dots there, and I was inquisitive about that. So I made a visit to Mr. Daniels' office, and he showed me the map that my dad signed that had the end of Ina Drive just like Mr. Dittmeyer's map. So I went home and I luckily found the Mylar. And the Mylar has been erased. It was proven in court that the Mylar was erased. Mr. Daniels said under oath he did not erase it, which meant that somebody in Lordstown Village erased that before it went, without my dad knowing it, looking as if the road went all the way to the end, which it still didn't. It still didn't when that map was made. So if we refer back to map 2.
Judy, we do have a 5-minute rule, so if you can wrap it up.
Okay. All right, I will. Just point out the other last map there, I think it's number 8, it shows you what the road looks like where the grassy area is all around it. The whole residue area is 125 foot by 60 foot by 30 foot. It's in probate court now because it's still under the estate. And what the city is trying to do now is take the center part of that and claim that they own it, and is splitting up my residue area. We have intentions of dividing that residue area between the neighbors. And the fence brought up in council under the Trumbull County subdivision regulations 303 that it can, the land, or combined with an existing joining tax parcel, which the total combined parcels would then comply with the Trumbull County residents. Of course, you just would be adding to it. So, in conclusion, the mayor told me that, and I told him that it was I found the guy that put the turnaround in, and that's in there. Mr. Daniels' letter is in there, where he has spoken about that, and his drawing shows where he had put that in there, Dan Lutz. And I told him that I found the guy that put it in. Let's settle this. It doesn't have to keep going on and keep going on. And he said, well, it's not up to me, it's up to council. So I went up to council several times and got things, but this last time I went, I was barred from looking at any of the records. What does that tell you?
You weren't barred.
Well, yes, I was. I was stopped.
For one day, because I'm the public records coordinator and I was off. Did I not call you the next day?
No.
Yes, I
It's
did.
2 days later.
No.
2 days later, and I was not allowed to look at the records. But in a day, Mr., I don't know what your name is, but you could hide a lot of things in a day. I didn't like that. I'm sorry, I didn't like that, but all of this has gone into the courts and
Okay,
everybody
Judy,
knows
your
it.
time's up, please.
Okay.
Your time's up, Judy. Thank you. Are there any other public remarks? Okay, hearing none, are there any council remarks? Hearing none, committee reports. Finance, Mr. Radka.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have one piece of legislation we'd like to see passed in emergency tonight.
Any questions for Ron? Parks, buildings, grounds, general improvements, streets and sidewalks, Mrs. Jones.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have we had the streets repainted this last weekend, and there were several questions I saw on Facebook and stuff about people wanting to know what was going on with all the vehicles with the lights and flashing lights and stuff. So I just wanted to let everybody know that the street restriping had been done. Is it completed yet, Dale?
It is not completed. They still have to come back and do dotted lines on the 4 lanes and the divider lines on the 4 lanes at the traffic signals, and a couple other places that they need to remove some paint.
Okay. So if you get any questions about what they're doing out there, that's what's happening.
Any questions for Karen? Public safety and welfare, Mr. Reader.
No report.
Questions for Don? Public utilities, Mr. Bond.
Mayor, we just have the 2 pieces of legislation that are change orders connected to the power plant. Both of these are reimbursable to the village. We'd like to see them passed as emergency tonight.
Okay, any questions for Bob? Transportation, recreation, and senior services, Mr. Shealy.
No report tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Questions for Howard? Bill, first piece of legislation, please.
From the Utilities Committee for emergency passage, an ordinance approving change order number 3 in the amount of $274,362.60 for SET Inc. in connection with the water line, sanitary sewer pump station improvements for the Clean Energy Future Lordstown project, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions?
Motion for emergency consideration.
Motion to suspend the rules by Bond. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Second by Reader. Roll call.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Limey?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carried to suspend the rules. Motion to adopt.
So moved.
Moved by Shealy. Second.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Second by Radka. Comment. Roll call, please.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Limey?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried to adopt ordinance 62, 2017. Next, please.
From Utilities Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance approving change order number 5 in connection with the Village of Lordstown amended master agreement for funding of legal, engineering, and construction costs for the Clean Energy Future Lordstown project and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions?
Motion to suspend.
Motion to suspend the rules by Jones, second.
Second.
Second by Liming. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Liming?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried to suspend the rules. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Moved by Shealy, second.
Second.
Second by Bond. Comments? Roll call.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Liming?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried to adopt ordinance 63, 2017. Next, please.
From Council of the Whole for emergency passage, an ordinance accepting the bid of Western Reserve Coach Sales, Inc. for the purchase of one used 2016 Ford Eldorado bus and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions?
Motion to suspend.
Motion to suspend the rules by Jones, second.
Second.
Second by Liming. Roll call, please.
Mr. Liming?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried to suspend the rules. Motion to adopt?
So moved.
Moved by Radka, second.
Second.
Second by Liming. Comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Liming?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried to adopt ordinance 64, 2017. Next, please.
From Finance Committee for emergency passage, an ordinance authorizing the clerk to transfer the sum of $312 from the general fund into the unclaimed money fund pursuant to ordinance 3999 and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions?
Motion to suspend.
Motion to suspend the rules by Radka, second. Second,
Liming.
Liming. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Liming?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried to suspend the rules. Motion to adopt?
So moved.
Moved by Bond, second.
Second.
Second by Jones. Comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Lyman?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried to adopt ordinance 65, 2017. Next, please.
From Negotiations Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 118, 2016, establishing the authorized strength, the salary, and other terms of remuneration for the part-time chief for the fire department and the part-time assistant fire chief for the Village of Lordstown, effective January 1st, 2018, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions?
Motion to suspend.
Motion suspended by Jones. Second.
Second.
Second by Bond. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Lyman?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
No.
Mr. Rader?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
5 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries to suspend the rules. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Moved by Shealy. Second.
Second.
Second Bond. Comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Rader?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
No.
Mr. Lyman?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
5 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries to adopt ordinance 66, 2017. Next, please.
The Negotiating Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 15, 2017, establishing the authorized strength, setting the hourly compensation and other terms of remuneration and conditions of service for members of the Lordstown Village Fire Department, effective January 1st, 2018, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions?
Motion to suspend rules.
Motion to suspend the rules by Shealy. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Second by Reader. Roll call, please.
Mr. Radka?
No.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Lyman?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
5 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries to suspend the rules. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Moved by Bond, second.
Second.
Second by Jones. Comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Lyman?
Yes.
Okay. Did you vote yes or no, Ron?
Yes.
Yes, okay. 6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried to adopt ordinance 61, 2017. Next, please.
From Negotiating Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 13, 2017, establishing a full-time ambulance service for the village of Lordstown, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions?
Motion to suspend.
Motion to suspend the rules by Jones, second.
Second.
Second by Shealy. Roll call, please.
Mr. Liming?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried to suspend the rules. Their motion to adopt.
So moved.
Moved by Bond, second.
Second.
Second by Reader. Comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Liming?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried to adopt. Ordinance 68, 2017. Next, please.
From Negotiating Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 25, 2017, establishing the authorized strength, the hourly wages, and other terms of remuneration, and revising the position description for the Assistant Planning and Zoning Administrator in the Planning and Zoning and Economic Development Departments of the Village of Lordstown, effective upon passage of this ordinance and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions?
Motion to suspend.
Motion to suspend the rules by Jones, second.
Second.
Second by Bond. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Liming?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
No.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
5 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries to suspend the rules. Their motion to adopt.
So moved.
Moved by Shealy, second.
Second.
Second by Jones. Comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
No.
Mr. Liming?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
5 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries to adopt. Ordinance 69, 2017. Is there any old business council would like to discuss at this time? Hearing none, new business, I'd like to go first. I'd like council to confirm the resignation of Taylor Romaine from the police department. She got a full-time job at Niles. I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Moved by Radka, second.
Second.
Second by Vaughn. Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there any other new business at this time?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to provide $350 for refreshments for the lighting ceremony, which will be held in Founders Park on November 17th at 6 p.m.
Everybody heard the motion by Mrs. Jones. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Shealy. Comments or questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Any other new business at this time?
Yes, I'd still like to make a motion to go into executive session to discuss this last ordinance that we passed for employee negotiation contract, inviting the mayor, council, clerk, and solicitor.
What about Mrs. Bordner, since she's the one that had to do with writing up these job descriptions?
Yeah, we can invite Kelly up.
I
You also-
want to be excused.
Excuse me, Bill?
I'd like to be excused from it.
Excusing Mr. Blunt.
I feel that this could roll over in Mr. Blank's position. I'd like to see it just everybody behind the dais.
I would
That's your
vote
call.
against that.
With the exception of the treasurer. Because I have some problems with some of the job descriptions. We've had some dialogue, and I don't know whether all the duties which are in there, which council has to vote on. And I'd like to see the ones just behind the dais, but that's your council's call. So Ron, whatever you want.
That's fine with me.
Well, it looks to me like the person who wrote it might have some good input that works with this person.
Well, I invited Kelly.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, you don't need me. I'm excused. I don't want to be back there.
We'll excuse Mr. Blunt. So
Hey.
inviting the mayor, council,
Solicitor and Kelly.
solicitor, and Kelly.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Second.
Second by Reader. Comments or questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes?
Mr. Liming?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried for that executive session. Is there any other new business at this time? Okay, this will take place after additional public remarks. Are there any other public remarks? Okay, the only action to be taken when we come out will be to adjourn. Feel free to stay if you'd like. If not, thank you for coming.